Both the quality control and the rate of scaling production has been insane with GigaShanghai, but after today's news, we're learning that that has not stopped with the Model 3. Now, of course, they're scaling production of that vehicle, lots of people buying the long-range model and performance models coming out soon, and they're gonna be pumping out 4,000 Model 3s a week at this factory, and at the same time, a significant milestone has been reached in Phase 2, which will be producing the made-in-China Model Y. That outer shell of that factory, known as Phase 2A for the people involved, has now been completed, which is a huge milestone considering that it wasn't too long ago that this factory just had its grand opening, and now they've already basically doubled the factory in size. In fact, Phase 2 is actually a little bit larger than Phase 1, and the market that the Model Y is targeted for is actually much higher than that of the Model 3. So if you think the scaling and production has been great for the Model 3 in China, I cannot wait to tell you guys the numbers on how the Model Y is doing later, because originally the Model 3, its production was not slated until 2020, but they were ahead of schedule and they actually had a few made-in-China Model 3s coming out of the factory by December of last year. And I think we could see something very, very similar with the Model Y, because the initial plan was to get the made-in-China Model Y out onto public streets in early 2021. But if the outer shell of the factory is done now, ahead of schedule, I think there's a good chance we could start seeing Chinese-made Model Ys hitting the road by the end of this year. If the outer shell is done, yes, obviously there's a lot more plumbing and lighting and electrical and parts that need to go into that factory before it can actually start churning out the Model Y, but I think they can do all of that in less than 6 months, personally, seeing how quickly they've been able to scale production there. So the reason I think this is a huge recipe for success for Tesla is that the Model 3 design, in a lot of ways, was kind of dated. In a lot of ways, they had to carry over some parts and some dated manufacturing methods that make the car more expensive and more complicated to produce, whereas Tesla has shown us how they've redesigned the Model Y in more ways than it actually appears. At first glance, obviously, it looks very similar to the Model 3, and it does share a lot of the same parts, which should mean bringing Model Y production over to GigaShanghai should be fairly easy, because they're gonna share so many of the parts that are already there for the Model 3, but the Model Y has simplified a whole lot of the unibody process, which should mean that the profit margins on the Model Y are much higher, and this is a nicer vehicle than the Model 3. Manufacturing costs in China are a lot cheaper, the maintaining of the factory is a lot cheaper than it is in the US, and with strong government support and huge EV credits, I think the Model Y is going to be an absolute cash cow for Tesla, and it's exciting to know that some of the first Model Ys out of China could be produced by the end of this year if things go as fast as they're going currently. Part of that 2020 goal of hitting 500,000 vehicles within a 12-month span might be made partially possible thanks to the insane production ramping of GigaShanghai, and that's not just good news for people in China. Obviously good for you, but also this means that there's a lot less pressure on the US factory to produce Model Ys for the global market, and they can just focus on producing Model Ys in the United States. And I'm hoping that means not having to focus too much on such a high profit margin they may have had to focus on when the Model Y initially launched. So now that it's possible in 2020, Model Y could be hitting production in China, collecting huge profit margins in that demographic, and because Giga Berlin is on schedule, they're starting to lay concrete at the Berlin site as well. I think that could mean very competitive Model Y prices in the not too distant future, because obviously the Model Y ended up costing a bit more than Tesla initially promised. They said it would be around $51,000 for the dual motor variant, and it ended up being more like $53,000. Bit of an upcharge there of $2,000. However, the big changes that have been made since Tesla initially unveiled the Model Y is back during that unveiling. Autopilot was not included for free. Also, it was advertised with the 18-inch Aero wheels, and now the 19-inch Gemini wheels are standard with the Model Y. And also, when the Model Y was initially unveiled, it came with a standard black paint coating, and now it comes standard with a white pearl multi-coat color. So that's also more expensive. So it's kind of understandable why the prices ended up being higher than originally promised, but my hope is that once the standard range Model Y becomes available, or standard range plus, whatever they decide to call it, you'll be able to price it fairly close to what it was initially promised to be, which was $39,000, but I'm pretty sure there's no way they can hit that number exactly, especially if the Model 3 standard range plus is currently at $38,000. So my hope is that hopefully Model 3 price can go a little bit down, as well as Model Y standard range starting somewhere around $41,000, $42,000, knowing that they'll be collecting a profit off of it in China as soon as this year is great news. And keep it up, GigaShanghai, keep your scaling of production, and also great job with the quality control. I'll bet we'll see some of the most perfectly built Model Ys out of the Shanghai factory. What do you guys think of the production rate of GigaShanghai? Feel free to hit me up over on Twitter, join my Discord, we can chat more about it there. Thank you all for watching, hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care.